Good day, class. So today we're going to be working with our straight mannequins. We are going to make sure that we're working with really saturated hair. We're doing a wet cut, and we're going to section out our mannequin into 4 sections. The first one is going to be from the parietal ridge right down, right around. Then we're going to be working from the parietal ridge right behind the ear, and ensure that we have symmetry, so both sides are the same and everything is nice and sectioned out. And we're going to start with the back panel, creating a mohawk section. At this point, you're going to gently tilt your mannequin forward. So if this was a client, you'll just ask your client to gently put their head forward and section out the mohawk area for the back. We're going to be working basically with a 90-degree elevation for the top. We have a long subsection here, so we're just going to break that up into 2. And we are going to use a 90-degree elevation, just following the head shape, basically. And keep that in mind. So you want to make sure that you can check with your comb, as we always do for checking 90-degree elevation. And then we're going to move on. Now you can see the nice, neat subsection, no more than about 1.5 inches or so, 2 inches for the most. And that's going to give you a nice, really good subsection to start with. Continue to saturate your hair. Sometimes the hair can tend to dry out really quickly, and you just want consistency in your haircut. So I am just standing on this section right now, so you can see clearly in the camera. For this section, I am going to be retaining about 5 to 6 inches, about 5 inches or so. So that means I'm removing about half of the length. Your mannequins may be a lot shorter than mine's at this point because you've done your layered cut. I want to make sure that we see a definite difference with your mannequin, so I'll leave that judgment call up to you in terms of how much length you are going to be removing. Because we're going for a very layered cut when it comes to creating a shag effect, and then we're going to transform it to more of a mullet effect as well. So as you can see, I've started cutting and I'm working my way down my subsection, and I'm just doing a horizontal cut, just following the shape of the head basically at this point. When we get to the bottom of our subsection, you're just going to elevate and ensure that you have a bit of your previously cut so that you can see. Then you're going to watch my fingers tilt slightly, just adjusting my line of inclination slightly towards the end, outwards, to give me a bit more length. So let's just do that again, and you'll see that slight tilt that's going to happen right at the end. Yeah, that's going to give us just a little bit more length towards the bottom of our haircut. There we go. So we could already see the length at the top and the bottom. It's creating some layers and some movement. It's good to just kind of check that out as we go. So we have our mohawk section cut, and then we are going to be moving over about 1 inch to the left and doing a nice clean subsection on the left. We are going to be working with a traveling guide, so therefore we want to take a bit of our previously cut subsection, as you just seen me do. I just kind of divided that into half, just so that I have reference as I start elevating. I want to be able to see my previously cut as I work my way around the head shape. As you comb and project your subsection, you just want to make sure that you are able to see your previously cut subsection. Sometimes you may have to move that hair out the way just to identify where your cutting line was. So that's exactly what I just did. And once you identify it, you are able to continue with your traveling guide and build upon your haircut. Continue working your way down the subsection, just double checking to make sure that you are not losing track of where your guideline was. As I mentioned before, I wanted you to be able to see where I was going with my cutting line. So at this point right now, I am going to switch to the other side so you can see another perspective of this haircut. And right now I'm doing the exact same thing, but at this point I'm going to be projecting the hair towards me in a palm to palm cutting method. So our lines are exactly the same, and you've just seen the slight elevation I did at the bottom of our subsection. You can see that the line of inclination was just subtly tilted as I did before. So we're gaining some ground here. We just want to make sure to continue doing vertical sections throughout the whole back quadrant of this haircut. Now I'm just going to speed this up a bit, and we're going to continue with our traveling guide throughout the whole back quadrant. Now we're going to move over to the right side. We have our previously cut subsection, and we are going to do the exact same thing, just taking a nice clean vertical subsection and elevating, make sure that we have a guide reference, and continue with the exact same thing on the right side. Now, if I was working with super dense hair doing this exact same haircut, I would probably be doing some point cutting techniques. So I'm making sure that I texturize as I go. With this density, we're pretty good to continue to have movement and flow, and we can see that our lengths are matching up, and we do have some movement, and we can definitely see the layering happening in the back. So we're just checking there, and we're good to go and continue. Now we're gonna release our front subsection and just remove a subsection from that, and we are going to take that subsection and match it up with a bit of our previously cut, match the same elevation and projection, take a look at that cutting line, and continue our same cutting line as we had for the back. Just combing and checking, as I always say. And just, of course, if you missed anything along the way, you're able to clean up your haircut as you go. Now the next step is really important. We're going to break that into half. So you can just see how I just separated that from the top to the bottom for my front section. And I'm just going to put a clip in there and make sure that you can just kind of get that hair right out of the way at the bottom, because we are going to be protecting our perimeter. So we're just going to move that out the way, and I will just make light of how we're going to incorporate that into the haircut at this point. Then you're just going to continue with your same subsections in terms of the width of your subsection, and we're going to continue to do our traveling guide throughout the whole front subsections, knowing that there is a piece missing from the bottom. That is going to be incorporated later, as I mentioned, so don't overthink that. Do your same elevation and continue that haircut. Now for the very front, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Take some of my previous and continue that haircut. Then we're going to release the lower panel. We're going to have some obvious disconnection from our top panel towards our bottom, which was definitely intentional to create an area where we can retain some of the length in a really fluid manner. So if you have a razor, this would be a perfect opportunity to use your razor just to connect your front panel to your bottom panel with a really soft movement, so create a lot of movement and fluidity. If you don't have your razor, that's totally fine. You can use a slide cutting effect, and this is very effective as well. Just we want soft connection of these layers. So you're going to continue with your vertical subsections throughout the front, holding at a lower elevation just to make sure that you can see exactly what's happening with the collapse of your first top layer, and just to make sure that you're not cutting too much into the bottom panel. Ensure that your angle for your slide cutting is definitely not too aggressive. We just want to make sure and do some soft connections. So we're just doing some soft fluid connections. And of course, as I mentioned before, you can use your razor. So if you happen to have one, I'm going to use a bit of razor cutting right now with the exact same technique. So your slide cutting works just as well, but just for the sake of those who have your razor at home, you can follow the same exact technique for that. We still have some interior layers there happening, and we have our length towards the bottom, nice and light, but at least we know that we can have control over what we want the perimeter to look like. Then jump over to the other side and do the exact same thing. At this point, you can take a look at the whole outline. My mannequin doesn't have curtain bangs, as your mannequin was cut with curtain bangs previously. So at this point, you just take a look at the length, start to work on some detailing, get a really good, nice, solid shape that is nice and soft from both sides. And I would suggest just doing some point cutting for that. And we're working on small details to bring that haircut together. There should be a lot of movement throughout the interior at this point. So we're in the beginning stages of connecting the crown area with the interior of our haircut. Just remember to resaturate as you work your way through this haircut. Now I'm dividing the top area into 3 sections. Just making sure I have a clean subsection for the mohawk section at the top. So just standing to the side, just combing and elevating, taking a little section from my previously cut, and I'm going to use that as my guideline as I just over direct it back just to meet, and I'll be able to see that guideline that I cut before, and it will give me a good place to start. Then you're just going to continue, and then I'm going to move to my subsection that was at the side, and we're going to get a bit of our previous cut subsection and saturate very well. This area here sometimes can be a bit challenging because we're going to work with the entire subsection from the left. In most cases, you may have to switch to a bigger comb. For me, this is okay. I'm used to doing this. But at this point, you may see a lot of people using a bit of a bigger comb for more control. So now I've taken out the front portion of my subsection, and I'm getting all the control that I need and saturating as well. And then I'm preparing to cut again. I realize that you will have some pieces that fall out because of your curtain bangs, but that's totally fine. We will still continue to incorporate that with the rest of our look. Then you're going to grab the rest of the subsection and bring everything into that over-directed state, slightly over-directed state, and continue to take a look at your guideline. You're definitely going to have a lot of length to work with, but it's just giving us enough room to work with when we collapse those sections forward. And then I will explain what's going to happen next. Then we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. The foundation of our haircut is set, and then we're going to begin blow drying to prepare for the details of bringing this whole look together. Because all of you already have your curtain bangs already in, you will see some disconnected pieces happening at this point. So you can just grab this area here, and we're just going to work with some slide cutting just to remove excess weight and just to remove some of the pieces that are falling forward that definitely need to be blended in. So at this point, this is what we're doing. I'm just working with some dry cutting techniques, using our slide cutting technique to bring the whole look together. And I'm gonna be doing a lot of this. So I want everyone to get used to using this technique and just kind of getting comfortable with a freehand form. Getting our foundation in is important, and then of course if you do have your razor, this is a perfect opportunity to incorporate that into your haircut. Always remember to keep an angled razor to make sure we're not taking out any chunks. We want to make sure that our layers are very soft, intentional at the same time. So we're using some slide cutting and we're using some razor cutting throughout the entire interior, making sure that we're having an extremely textured and layered effect. Now I'm just going to use my thinning shears in some areas just to help ensure I have some really diffused lines. Nothing hard. I may jump into some particular areas if I see that it needs to be a little bit more diffused. Using my thinning shears to point cut as well, just ensuring I don't have any extra density in any particular area. As well as cutting, I love to work with color as well, so I decided to incorporate that into the haircut. I used a semi-permanent pink fashion color and Goldwell 6N at the root. As it continues to dry, you can really see the shag look coming to life. Voila. I decided to go in with the flat iron and smoothen out the whole look and then add additional texturizing. I added a little texture spray, and voila. Now to transform this shag more into a mullet, I'm removing length and weight from the midsection. Ideally, a shag should be short in the front and longer towards the nape. Voila! Next, to change the look, I'm going in with my flat iron with some multi-directional styling. Voila! Then I just experimented with a scarf to change the look up. And yes, you guessed it, voila!